All right. Chapter 28. After 20 years, Kate Barlow returned to Green Lake. It was a place where nobody would ever find her. A ghost town on a ghost lake. You know what that means, right? Like nobody's around. It's all empty. Everybody's moved away. The peach trees had all died, but there were a couple of small oak trees still growing by an old abandoned cabin. The cabin used to be on the eastern shore of the lake. Now the edge of the lake was over 5 miles away, and it was little more than a small pond full of dirty water. She lived in the cabin. Sometimes she could hear Sam's voice echoing across the emptiness. Onions, sweet fresh onions. She knew she was crazy. She knew she'd been crazy for the last 20 years. Oh, Sam, she would say, speaking into the vast emptiness. I know it's hot, but I feel so very cold. My hands are cold. My feet are cold. My face is cold. My heart is cold. And sometimes she would hear him say, I can fix that. And she'd feel his warm arm across her shoulders. She'd been living in the cabin for about 3 months when she was awakened one morning by someone kicking open the cabin door. She opened her eyes to see the blurry end of a rifle 2 inches from her nose. She could smell Trout Walker's dirty feet. You've got exactly 10 seconds to tell me where you've hidden your loot, said Trout, or else I'll blow your head off. She yawned. A red-headed woman was there with Trout. Kate could see her rummaging through the cabin, dumping drawers and knocking things from the shelves of cabinets. The woman came to her. Where is it? She demanded. Linda Miller? Asked Kate. Is that you? Linda Miller had been in her 4th grade, in the 4th grade when Kate Barlow was still a teacher. She had been a cute, freckle-faced girl with beautiful red hair. Now her face was blotchy and her hair was dirty and scraggly. I'm Linda Walker now. Oh, sorry. It's Linda Walker now, said Trout. Oh, Linda, I am so sorry, said Kate. Trout jabbed her throat with the rifle. Where's the loot? There is no loot, said Kate. Don't give me that, shouted Trout. You've robbed every bank from here to Houston. You better tell him, said Linda. We're desperate. You married him for his money, didn't you? Asked Kate. Linda nodded. But it's all gone. It dried up along with the lake. The peach trees, the livestock. I kept thinking it has to rain soon. This can't last forever. But it just keeps getting hotter and hotter and hotter. Her eyes fixed on the shovel, which was leaning up against the fireplace. She's buried it, she declared. I don't know what you're talking about, said Kate. There was a loud blast as Trout fired his rifle just above her head. The window behind her shattered. Where's it buried? He demanded. Go ahead and kill me, Trout, said Kate. But I sure hope you like to dig. 'Cause you're going to be digging for a long time. It's a big, vast wasteland out there. You and your children and their children can dig for the next 100 years and you'll never find it. Linda grabbed Kate's hair and jerked her head back. Oh, we're not going to kill you, she said. But by the time we're finished with you, you're going to wish you were dead. I've been wishing I was dead for the last 20 years, said Kate. They dragged her out of bed and pushed her outside. She wore blue silk pajamas. Her turquoise-studded black boots remained beside her bed. They loosely tied her legs together so she could walk, but she couldn't run. They made her walk barefoot on the hot ground. They wouldn't let her stop walking. Not until you take us to the loot, said Trout. Linda hit Kate on the back of her legs with the shovel. You're going to take it to us sooner or later, so you might as well make it sooner. She walked one way, then the other, until her feet were black and blistered. Whenever she stopped, Linda whacked her with the shovel. I'm losing my patience, warned Trout. She felt the shovel jab into her back and she fell onto the hard dirt. Get up, ordered Linda. Kate struggled to her feet. We're being easy on you today, said Trout. It's just going to keep getting worse and worse for you until you take us to it. Look out, shouted Linda. A lizard leapt toward them. Kate could see its big red eyes. Linda tried to hit it with the shovel and Trout shot at it, but they both missed. The lizard landed on Kate's bare ankle. Its sharp black teeth bit into her leg. Its white tongue lapped up the droplets of blood and leaked out of the wound. Kate smiled. There was nothing they could do anymore. Start digging, she said. Where is it? Linda screeched. Where did you bury it? Trout demanded. Kate Barlow died laughing. So why did she die laughing? Think about that. Okay, This book is divided into 3 parts. This is part 2, and it's called The Last Hole. So we've read part 1 was over half the book. Now we're on part 2, called The Last Hole. Chapter 29. There was a change in the weather, for the worse. The air became unbearably humid. Stanley was drenched in sweat. Beads of moisture ran down the handle of his shovel. It was almost as if the temperature had gotten so hot that the air itself was sweating. A loud boom of thunder echoed across the empty lake. A storm was way off to the west, beyond the mountains. Stanley could count more than 30 seconds between the flash of lightning and the clap of thunder. That was how far away the storm was. Sound travels a great distance across a barren wasteland. Usually, Stanley couldn't see the mountains at this time of day. The only time they were visible was just at sunup, before the air became hazy. Now, however, the sky was very dark off to the west, and every time the lightning flashed, the dark shape of a mountain would briefly appear. "Come on, rain!" shouted Armpit. "Blow this way!" "Maybe it'll rain so hard it'll fill up the whole lake," said Squid. "We could go swimming." 40 days and 40 nights, said X-Ray. "Guess we better start building us an ark. Get 2 of each animal, right?" "Right," said Zigzag. 2 rattlesnakes, 2 scorpions, and 2 yellow-spotted lizards. The humidity, or maybe the electricity in the air, had made Zigzag's head even more wild-looking. His frizzy blonde hair stuck almost straight out. The horizon lit up with a huge web of lightning. In that split second, Stanley thought he saw an unusual rock formation on the top of one of the mountain peaks. The peak looked to him exactly like a giant fist, with the thumb sticking straight up, and then it was gone. And Stanley wasn't sure if he had seen it or not. "I found refuge on God's thumb." That was what his great-grandfather had supposedly said after Kate Barlow had robbed him and left him stranded in the desert. No one ever knew what he meant by that. He was delirious when he had said it. But how could he live for 3 weeks without food or water? Stanley had asked his father. "I don't know, I wasn't there," replied his father. "I wasn't born yet. My father wasn't born yet. My grandmother, your great-grandmother, was a nurse in the hospital where they treated him. He'd always talked about how she would dab his forehead with a cool wet cloth. He said that's why he fell in love with her. He thought she was an angel." "A real angel?" His father didn't know. "What about after he got better? Did he ever say what he meant by God's thumb or how he survived?" "Nope, he just blamed his no-good pig-stealing father." The storm moved off further west, along with any hope of rain, but the image of the fist and the thumb remained in Stanley's head. Although, instead of lightning flashing behind the thumb, in Stanley's mind, the lightning was coming out of the thumb, as if it were the thumb of God. Chapter 30. The next day was Zigzag's birthday, or so he said. Zigzag lay in his cot as everyone headed outside. "I get to sleep in because it's my birthday." Then a little while later, he cut into the breakfast line just in front of Squid. Squid said to him to get to the end of the line. "Hey, it's my birthday," Zigzag said, staying right where he was. "It's not your birthday," said Magnet, who was standing behind Squid. "Is too," said Zigzag. "July 8th. Stanley was behind Magnet. He didn't know what day of the week it was, let alone the date. It could have been July 8th, but how would Zigzag know? He tried to figure out how long he had been at Camp Green Lake, if indeed it was July 8th. "I came here on May 24th, he said aloud. "So that means I've been here 46 days, said Zero. Stanley was still trying to remember how many days there were in May and June. He looked at Zero. He'd learned not to doubt him when it came to math. 46 days. It felt more like 1,000. He didn't dig a hole that first day, and he hadn't dug one yet today. That meant he had dug 44 holes, if it really was July 8th. "Hey, can I have an extra carton of juice?" Zigzag asked Mr. Sir. "It's my birthday." To everyone's surprise, Mr. Sir gave it to him. Stanley dug his shovel into the dirt. Hole number 45. "The 45th hole is the hardest," he said to himself. But that wasn't really true, and he knew it. He was a lot stronger than when he had first arrived. His body had adjusted somewhat to the heat and harsh conditions. Mr. Sir was no longer depriving him of water. After having to get by on less water for a week or so, Stanley now felt like he had all the water he could want. Of course, it helped that Zero dug some of his hole for him each day, but that wasn't as great as everyone thought it was. He always felt awkward when Zero was digging his hole, unsure what to do with himself. Usually he stood around a while before sitting off by himself on the hard ground, with the sun beating down on him. It was better than digging, but not a lot better. When the sun came up a couple of hours later, Stanley looked for the thumb of God. The mountains were little more than dark shadows on the horizon. He thought he could make out a spot where the top of the mountain seemed to jut upward, but it didn't seem very impressive. A short time later, the mountains were no longer visible, hidden behind the glare of the sun, reflecting off the dirty air. It was possible, he realized, that he was somewhere near where Kate Barlow had robbed his great-grandfather. If that was really her lipstick tube he'd found, then she must have lived somewhere around here. Zero took his turn before the lunch break. Stanley climbed up out of his hole, and Zero climbed down into it. "Hey, caveman," said Zigzag, "you should get a whip. Then if your servant doesn't dig fast enough, you can crack it across his back." "He's not my slave," said Stanley. "We have a deal, that's all." "Yeah, good deal for you," said Zigzag. "It was Zero's idea, not mine." "Don't you know, Zig," said X-Ray, coming over, "Caveman's doing Zero a big favor. Zero likes to dig holes." "He sure is a nice guy to let Zero dig his holes for him," said Squid. "Well, what about me?" asked Armpit. "I like to dig holes too. Can I dig for you, Caveman, after Zero's finished?" The other boys all laughed. "No, I want to," said Zigzag. "It's my birthday." Stanley tried his best to ignore them. Zigzag kept at it. "Come on, Caveman, be a pal. Let me dig your hole." Stanley smiled as if it were all just a big joke. When Mr. Pendanski arrived with water and lunch, Zigzag offered Stanley his place in line. "Since you're so much better than me." Stanley remained where he was. I didn't say I was "Oh, you're insulting him, Zig," said X-Ray. "Why should Caveman take your place when he deserves to be at the very front? He's better than all of us, aren't you, Caveman?" "No," said Stanley. "Sure you are," said X-Ray. "Now come to the front of the line where you belong." "No, that's okay," said Stanley. "No, it's not okay," said X-Ray. "Get up here." Stanley hesitated and then moved to the front of the line. "Well, this is a first," Mr. Pendanski said, coming around the side of the truck. He filled Stanley's canteen and handed him a sack lunch. Stanley was glad to get away. He sat down between his hole and Zero's. He was glad that he'd be digging his own hole for the rest of the day. Maybe the other boys would leave him alone. Maybe he shouldn't let Zero dig his hole for him anymore. But he needed to save his energy if he was going to be a good teacher. He bit into his sandwich, which contained some kind of meat and cheese mixture, which came in a can. Just about everything at Camp Green Lake came in a can. The supply truck came only once a month. He glanced up to see Zigzag and Squid walking toward him. "I'll give you my cookie if you let me dig your hole," said Zigzag. Squid laughed. "Here, take my cookie," said Zigzag, holding it out for him. "No thanks," said Stanley. "Come on, take my cookie," said Zigzag, sticking it into his face. "Leave me alone," said Stanley. "Please eat my cookie," said Zigzag, holding it under Stanley's nose. Squid laughed. Stanley pushed it away. Zigzag pushed him back. "Don't push me." "I didn't," Stanley said, getting to his feet. He looked around. Mr. Pendanski was filling Zero's canteen. Zigzag pushed Stanley again and said, "Don't push me." Stanley took a step backward, carefully avoiding Zero's hole. Zigzag kept after him. He shoved Stanley in again and said, "Quit pushing!" So you get this, right? Stanley's not doing any pushing at all. Zigzag is doing all the pushing and continues to say to Stanley, "Stop pushing me." "Lay off," said Armpit, as he, Magnet, and X-Ray joined them. "Why should he?" snapped X-Ray. "Caveman's bigger. He can take care of himself." "I don't want any trouble," Stanley said. Zigzag pushed him hard. "Eat my cookie," he said. Stanley was glad to see Mr. Pendanski coming toward them along with Zero. "Hey, Mom," said Armpit. "We're just fooling around." "I saw what was going on," Mr. Pendanski said. He turned to Stanley. "Go ahead, Stanley," he said. "Hit him back. You're bigger." Stanley stared at Mr. Pendanski in astonishment. "Teach the bully a lesson," said Mr. Pendanski. Zigzag hit Stanley on the shoulder with his open hand. "Yeah, teach me a lesson," he challenged. Stanley made a feeble attempt to punch Zigzag. Then he felt a flurry of fists against his head and neck. Zigzag had hold of his collar with one hand and was hitting him with the other. The collar ripped and Stanley fell backward onto the dirt. "That's enough!" Mr. Pendanski yelled. It wasn't enough for Zigzag. He jumped on top of Stanley. "Stop!" shouted Mr. Pendanski. The side of Stanley's face was pressed flat against the dirt. He tried to protect himself, but Zigzag's fist slammed off his arms and pounded his face into the ground. All he could do was wait for it to be over. Then suddenly Zigzag was off of him. Stanley managed to look up and he saw that Zero had his arms around Zigzag's long neck. Zigzag made a gagging sound as he desperately tried to pry Zero's arm off of him. "You're going to kill him!" shouted Mr. Pendanski. Zero kept squeezing. Armpit charged into them, freeing Zigzag from Zero's chokehold. The three boys fell to the ground in different directions. Mr. Pendanski fired his pistol into the air. The other counselors came running from the office, the tents, or out on the lake. They had their guns drawn, but holstered them when they saw that the trouble was over. The warden walked over from her cabin. "There was a riot," Mr. Pendanski told her. "Zero almost strangled Ricky." The warden looked at Zigzag, who was still stretching and massaging his neck. And then she turned her attention to Stanley, who was obviously in the worst condition. "And what happened to you?" "Nothing. It wasn't a riot." "Ziggy was beating up the caveman," said Armpit. "Then Zero started choking Zigzag, and I had to pull Zero off of Zigzag. It was all over before Mom even fired his gun." "They just all got a little hot, that's all," said X-Ray. "You know how it is. In the sun all day. People get hot, right? But everything's cool now." "I see," the warden said. She turned to Zigzag. "What's the matter? Didn't you get a puppy for your birthday?" "Oh, Zig's just a little hot," said X-Ray. "Out in the sun all day, you know how it is. The blood starts to boil." "Is that what happened, Zigzag?" asked the warden. "Yeah," said Zigzag. "Like X-Ray said, working so hard in the hot sun while Caveman just sits around doing nothing. My blood boiled." "Excuse me," said the warden. "Caveman digs his holes like everyone else." Zigzag shrugged. "Sometimes." "Excuse me?" "Zero's been digging part of Caveman's hole every day," said Squid. The warden looked from Squid to Stanley to Zero. I'm teaching him how to read and write," said Stanley. "It's just sort of a trade. The hole still gets dug, so what does it matter who digs it?" "Excuse me?" said the warden. Isn't it more important for him to learn how to read?" Stanley asked. "Doesn't that build character more than digging holes?" "That's his character," said the warden. "What about your character?" Stanley raised and lowered one shoulder. The warden turned to Zero. "Well, Zero, what have you learned so far?" Zero said nothing. "Have you been digging Caveman's hole for nothing?" the warden asked him. "Oh, he likes to dig holes," said Mr. Pendanski. "Tell me what you learned yesterday," said the warden. "Surely you can remember that." Zero said nothing. Mr. Pendanski laughed. He picked up a shovel and said, "You might as well try and teach this shovel to read. It's got more brains than Zero." "The at sound," said Zero. "The at sound," repeated the warden. "Well then, tell me, what does C-A-T spell?" Zero glanced around uneasily. Stanley knew he knew the answer. Zero just didn't like answering questions. "Cat," Zero said. Mr. Pendanski clapped his hands. "Bravo! Bravo! The boy's a genius!" "F-A-T," asked the warden. Zero thought for a moment. Stanley hadn't taught him the f sound yet. F, Zero whispered. F. Fat. "How about H-A-T?" asked the warden. Stanley hadn't taught him the H sound either. Zero concentrated really hard and then said, "Chat." All the counselors laughed. "Ah, he's a genius, all right," said Mr. Pendanski. "He's so dumb he doesn't even know he's dumb." Stanley didn't know why Mr. Pendanski seemed to have it in for Zero. If Mr. Pendanski only thought about it, he'd realize that it was actually really logical for Zero to think that the letter H made the ch sound. "Okay, from now on, I don't want anyone digging anyone else's hole," said the warden. "And no more reading lessons." "I'm not digging another hole," said Zero. "Good," said the warden. She turned to Stanley. "You know why you're digging holes? Because it's good for you. It teaches you a lesson. If Zero digs your hole for you, then you're not learning your lesson, are you?" "I guess not," Stanley mumbled, although he knew they were not digging just to learn a lesson. She was looking for something that belonged to Kiss and Kate Barlow. "Why can't I dig my own hole but still teach Zero how to read?" he asked. "What would be wrong with that?" "I'll tell you what's wrong with that," the warden said. "It leads to trouble. Zero almost killed Zigzag." It causes him stress, said Mr. Pendanski. I know you mean well, Stanley, but face it. Zero's too dumb to learn how to read. That makes his blood boil, not the hot sun. I'm not digging another hole, said Zero. Mr. Pendanski handed him the shovel. Here, take it, Zero. It's all you'll ever be good for. Zero took the shovel. Then he swung it like a baseball bat. The metal blade smashed across Mr. Pendanski's face. His knees crumpled beneath him. He was unconscious before he hit the ground. The counselors all drew their guns. Zero held the shovel out in front of him as if he were going to try to bat away the bullets. I hate digging holes, he said. Then he slowly backed away. Don't shoot him, said the warden. He can't go anywhere. The last thing we need is an investigation. Zero kept backing up, out past the cluster of holes the boys had been digging, and then farther and farther out onto the lake. He's going to have to come back to get water, the warden said. Stanley noticed Zero's canteen lying on the ground near his hole. A couple of the counselors helped Mr. Pendanski to his feet and into the truck. Stanley looked out towards Zero, but he had disappeared into the haze. The warden ordered the counselors to take turns guarding the shower room and rec room all day and all night. They were not to let Zero drink any water. When he returned, he was to be brought directly to her. She examined her fingernails, and she said, It's almost time for me to paint my nails again. Before she left, she told the 6 remaining members of Group D that she still expected 7 holes. Chapter 31. Stanley angrily dug his shovel into the dirt. He was angry at everyone. Mr. Pendanski, the warden, Zigzag, X-Ray, and his no-good, dirty, rotten, pig-stealing great-great-grandfather. But mostly he was angry at himself. He knew he never should have let Zero dig part of his hole for him. He still could have taught him how to read. If Zero could dig all day and still have the strength to learn, then he should have been able to dig all day and still have the strength to teach. What he should do, he thought, was go out after Zero. But he didn't. None of the others helped him dig Zero's hole, and he didn't expect them to. Zero had been helping him dig his hole, and now he had to dig Zero's. He remained out on the lake, digging during the hottest part of the day, long after everyone else had gone in. He kept an eye out for Zero, but Zero didn't come back. It would have been easy to go out after Zero. There was nobody to stop him. He kept thinking that's what he should do. Maybe they could climb to the top of Big Thumb. If it wasn't too far away, and if it really was the same place where his great-grandfather found refuge, and if, after 100 years or so, that water was still there, it didn't seem likely. Not when an entire lake had gone dry. And even if they did find refuge on Big Thumb, he thought, they'd still have to come back here eventually. And then they'd both have to face the warden and her rattlesnake fingers. Instead, he came up with a better idea. Although he didn't quite have it figured out yet, he thought that maybe he could make a deal with the warden. He'd tell her where he really found the gold tube if she wouldn't scratch Zero. He wasn't sure how he'd make the deal without getting himself in deeper trouble. She might just say, tell me where you found it or I'll scratch you too. And plus it would mean X-Ray would get into trouble too, and she'd probably scratch him as well. X-Ray would be out to get him for the next 16 months. He dug his shovel into the dirt. By the next morning, Zero still hadn't returned. Stanley saw one of the counselors sitting guard by the water spigot outside the shower wall. Mr. Pendanski had 2 black eyes and a bandage over his nose. I always knew he was dumb, Stanley heard him say. Stanley was required to dig only 1 hole the next day. As he dug, he kept a constant watch out for Zero, but never saw him. Once again, he considered going out to the lake to look for him, but he began to realize that it was already too late. His only hope was that Zero had found God's thumb on his own. It wasn't impossible. His great-grandfather had found it. For some reason, his great-grandfather had felt the urge to climb to the top of that mountain. Maybe Zero would feel the same urge. It was the same mountain. If water was still there. If it was the same mountain, and if water was still there. He tried to convince himself that it wasn't impossible. There had been a storm just a few days ago. Maybe Big Thumb was actually some kind of natural water tower that caught all and stored the rain. It wasn't impossible. He returned to his tent to find the warden, Mr. Sir, and Mr. Pendanski all waiting for him. Have you seen Zero? The warden asked. No. No sign of him at all? No. Do you have any idea where he went? No. You know you're not doing him any favors if you're lying, said Mr. Sir. He can't survive out there for more than a day or two. I don't know where he is. All three stared at Stanley as if they were trying to figure out if he was telling the truth. Mr. Pendanski's face was so swollen he could barely open his eyes. They were just slits. You sure he has no family? The warden asked Mr. Pendanski. Oh, whoops, I'm not sure what happened there. He's a ward of the state, Mr. Pendanski told her. He was living on the streets when he was arrested. Is there anyone who might ask questions? Some social worker who might have taken an interest in him? He had nobody, said Mr. Pendanski. He was nobody. The warden thought for a moment. Okay, I want you to destroy all his records. Mr. Pendanski nodded. He was never here, said the warden. Mr. Sir nodded. Can you get me into the state files from our computer? She asked Mr. Pendanski. I don't want anyone in the AG's office to know that he was here. And AG was A period, G period, initials. I don't think I can completely erase him from all the state files, said Mr. Pendanski. Too many cross-references. But I can make it so it would be very difficult for anyone to find a record of him. Like I said, though no one will ever look. No one cares about Hector Zeroni. Good, said the warden. And we're stopping.